Well, we've had very positive feedback to the survey, very positive both in the sense of the number of people that contributed, over 1,000 people contributed, and very positive in the sense that over 94.4% of the people that contributed felt that GBC provided a vital, very important role to the community.
Two elements which are very popular at GBC, news generally, and also Radio Gibraltar.
Radio Gibraltar has done outstandingly well. 52.8% of people that contribute to the survey listen to Radio Gibraltar, which puts it at the top radio station listened to in Gibraltar. And of those 52%, 85% felt that radio provided it, or they were very satisfied with the service that they heard from Radio Gibraltar.
Well, GBC Television has, of course, invested a lot of time and effort and money in recent years in producing local content. Is that reflected in the survey?
Indeed, I think the main programmes that get watched on GBC are very news-led. So News Watch is a main programme that gets watched with about 69% of the population watching News Watch, and Viewpoint is also extremely popular with about 35% of the population listening to that. But amongst that, there are other programmes, for example, Rock Chef, with 25% of the people that contribute to the survey listening to that, are watching that, and other programmes. So, for example, when we've done the live football, about 20% of people that contribute to the survey have watched the live football matches.
Well, we've covered the positive stuff. What are viewers and listeners less happy with?
I think one of the things that comes across is that they see GBC as vital to the information requirements and vital to the news. And clearly, a lot of people have contributed to the survey have commented that they would like, for example, news at the weekends. They'd also like more extensive programming. They'd like on GBC TV less imports and more locally produced programming. That is the outcome really of the feedback that we've got from carrying out the survey.
And as chairman of the board, how realistic a prospect is, for example, news at the weekends?
Well, everything boils down to cost. We have a budget and we try to make the most of that budget, and it depends on how we want to use that budget to provide the population at large with the service that GBC provides, and we have to have a balance in how we do that. And for example, news, if we look at the number of people that provide news and work in the newsroom, if we were to emulate that at the weekends so that we had a broadcast on a Saturday and a Sunday to provide news, the cost of that, including the people in the newsroom, the people that would have to come and do the camera work, the people that edit, it would be quite prohibitive. You're talking about £200,000, and for that reason we've taken the view at this point in time that it can't be justified. There are other aspects and other ways that we do deliver the news. One of the ways that we do that is through our social media, and that is increasingly popular, as well as the website. So news does get delivered at weekends through that medium. And of course, there have been circumstances in the last year where people have come in. So for example, when we had the explosion, people did come in to cover that, and GBC was, I think, one of the channels through which the population at large found out what was going on.
According to the survey, there's an expectation that breaking news should be carried live. Is that a realistic prospect?
It depends on the news, and it also depends on the cost. It is very difficult to deploy people from the newsroom and from other departments who may be doing other things to a particular area at a particular point in time. The topography of Gibraltar is somewhat unusual, which means that it doesn't always lend itself to getting a signal easily. There is clearly expense in terms of having the equipment that will deliver that signal, and we're looking at other ways of making sure that information does get back, but it's not always possible, given the costs and given some of the other aspects, to be able to deliver news from the spot live.
More generally, there is an appetite for more news coverage. Is GBC going to respond to this?
As we've said, news is clearly what the population are interested in and what the feedback we've had. We're looking at some changes. For example, I understand that on Viewpoint we will have a fixed presenter, and we'll do this more regularly, once a week instead of once every 2 weeks. And we're going to try to deliver the news more regularly. For example, we use, as I mentioned before, things like Twitter and social media to get the news there. But what we've seen from the survey is that not everybody likes the news delivered via those mediums. They still prefer the television. And when you've got the daytime images that appear on GBC, when we're not transmitting, we're just advertising for the programs. We will also have a live ticker, or looking at having a live ticker that will relay that news so that people can switch on the televisions and find out what's going on.
You've explained some of the challenges that GBC faces when trying to cover breaking news live, but what about other outside broadcasts like a local production, a play or a dance? Could GBC not carry more of these live?
Again, everything, unfortunately, boils down to cost. We have looked at this. Equipment, since we brought in the Broadcasting Act and we went digital, things are very expensive and they're moving very quickly. One of the things we've looked at is buying an OB van that will allow that transmission. We use that van, and we've got one on hire at the moment that we use about 10 to 15 times a year. That is expensive. You've seen that used at football matches, but every time we deploy that, that needs to be deployed with about 10 people, and the cost of deploying is about £15,000. So you need to weigh that cost against not delivering other programming. So we try to use that van. Do we want to buy another van? Of course you'd like to buy a van, but with things changing as they are, 4K TV will be in shortly, buying a van will soon be obsolete. So one of the thinking is not to push that one at this point in time and to continue to hire a van and use that.
In the previous survey it was said that GBC was importing too many programs and there wasn't enough local content. Things have changed significantly since then. What's the general consensus? Is GBC getting it right, the balance right between locally produced content and imported programs?
I think by and large we are. I think by and large the survey shows that. People do prefer local content to imported content, but we need to maintain a mix to ensure that it's affordable and people do have a mix as to what they see and they enjoy watching television. So there are people who do enjoy the bought-in content, but there clearly is a demand for locally produced content, and over the last year and a bit, I think there has been a lot more locally produced content.
But that is more expensive than bought-in content?
It is more expensive. It is more expensive. It has to be done locally, and it has to be done with the resources we have, and that is more expensive than some of the bought-in content. And again, it's about filling the schedule. There are so many hours we have to fill, and the mix is what enables us to do that.
So one of the criticisms levelled at GBC is that yes, there is more local content, but there's also more repetition. Was this reflected in the survey?
Yes, that is also a criticism that is raised, and we're going to address that by changing the mix and having a bit more bought-in content, a bit more locally produced content, and cutting down the amount of repeats.
And finally, this is the first survey since 2007. How far do you think GBC has come in the past 7 years?
We think it's come along quite far, and quite far since the relaunch. I think the viewer that watch GBC television will see that there is a lot more locally produced content, and the staff at GBC have risen to the challenge and are certainly working very hard to produce content that people want to see.